Hey everybody, I am doing an interview here with Leah Farrow, and she is an ex-Sea Org member, ex-Scientologist, who worked on the Freewinds, the Sea Org motor vessel that is owned by the Church of Scientology and sails around in the Caribbean and is responsible for delivering the highest OT level in Scientology, OT level 8. And that is the main purpose and function of the ship, but it is also broadened out to also deliver other services, courses, and that revolve around L. Ron Hubbard's lectures, and the ship also offers a service called the Officer Training School for Sea Org members who go there and do leadership training. And I think that's now available for public as well. They can pay and go there and learn how to be little Sea Org members. So anyway, that is the ship. We're going to talk with Leah about all of this. So hi, Leah.
Hi.
Glad that that we could finally connect up and make this work.
Yep. Yes, technology is tricky sometimes.
Exactly. All right. Well, first off, let's just talk about you a little bit. So how long were you in Scientology and how long have you been out of it?
Okay, so I was raised in Scientology.
Okay.
My parents were Scientologists. I have a brother and sister. My sister is still a Scientologist, actually. And my dad actually was the first to get into it, and then he got his sisters into it. So 2 sisters, and then an uncle as well. So I had 2 aunts, an uncle, siblings, cousins, everyone in Scientology.
All right. So they all just mass went in there.
Yeah. Anyway, so I was raised in it, and then I basically decided I wasn't a Scientologist around the age of 24. So I'm 38 now. So about 14 years ago is when I was just decided I was done fully.
Okay, and that was around 2003 or so.
Yes, about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when were you in so you're raised in it, and when were you in the Sea Org?
So I joined the Sea Org when I was 15 in 1994, and I left just before my 21st birthday in 2000. So I was almost 6 years.
Okay, 6 years in, which is a good, healthy amount of time to be involved in that. I mean, certainly a deep dip, not just a shallow, I was in for a couple months sort of thing.
Yeah.
Okay, and of course, second gen, like
Yes.
me and many others. So what's the current status with your family now?
Well, everyone is out with the exception of my sister.
Okay.
At this point, and she is she's very much in, but she says she would never disconnect from us. I'm not declared, and my parents are not declared. I mean, not yet anyway.
I'm sorry, did you say you did or did not get declared?
I'm not.
You're not? Okay.
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, honestly, talking to me might change that, but...
Bring it on.
Okay. All right, just so we're clear on that, because the church doesn't cotton to folks talking to people like me. I mean, but since you're not in Scientology anymore, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how far they're gonna stretch their... I don't know if anybody's going to take the time to actually go through putting the whole package together and sending on up the line and all that. And since you've been out for so long, who cares?
Yeah.
What is your how is it your sister has managed to, with everybody else kind of going in and then leaving, where's she at? I mean, I don't mean geographically. I mean, where's she at on the bridge, and why is she persisting?
I don't even think that she's made it to clear yet. A couple of things happened. She married a Scientologist, and his whole family, they are all Scientologists. So, and all of her friends are Scientologists, which of course mine were too, but, so it's hard to kind of extract herself from that. She's also kind of had a little bit of a fortuitous sort of privileged existence in Scientology, and I mean that not as a diss on her, but more just like she got lucky in that most of her experiences have been very positive. She hasn't ever been recruited really hardcore for whatever reason.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know. Like she's lived this she's kind of like floated through, and she's also, she moved out to Los Angeles when she was about 15, 16 to go to, not Mace Kingsley Ranch. There was another ranch out there that Mojave Desert Ranch.
She went to the Mojave Desert School?
Yeah. Well, she went there and graduated from there, but also was a nanny there for, I think, the ED of the Mojave Desert School.
Yoka Clegg?
Yes.
Okay.
I believe that she was a nanny to her kid, and that paid her way through the school. And then she ended up moving to Los Angeles to become an actress, and then slowly did the northern migration as she had a family, so she moved to San Jose, and now she lives in Portland. So, right. So she has always been kind of at these smaller orgs, from, adolescence on. We lived in Clearwater, so she moved to Clearwater from Clearwater at 16.
Okay.
And for whatever reason, she hasn't had any of the bad experiences. Like most of the bad experiences, those come from me.
Okay. Okay.
It's almost like, sometimes I liken it to like, the senator's kid who doesn't get, recruited for the war. It's like I'm the oldest, so somehow I got all of it, and she sort of like slid under the radar a little bit.
Interesting.
And any bad experiences she has had, she's attributed to being out tech, not being kind of what is intended in the church. And so she's, written it up and pushed back and stuff. And most of the time she's gotten a positive outcome, but none of the experiences have been, really like big bad experiences. It's been like, they wrenched me a little too hard. And she's happened to have friends in the church who kind of, are on her side and help her along. So it's just, I don't know, it's kind of a perfect storm somehow that she's escaped.
Interesting.
Any really scathing things. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, of course, you'd have to have people who've had, positive experiences to continue going. I mean, idiots
Right.
like us, we stood around until we had something horrible happen to us, and then we're like, oh, yeah, okay. Maybe this isn't everything it's cracked up to be, and she hasn't quite had that happen yet, so okay. I mean, I'm not going to blame her for not having had bad things happen to her. Good for her, But but interesting. I have to ask, having interviewed Larissa Smith on my channel here about the Mojave Desert School, because she went out there and had a really horrific time. Was your sister sent there for disciplinary reasons, or should she just go there because what was the reasoning?
No, she actually, I think she met someone, or she heard about someone who knew there was a nanny position open, and so she went there because she loves horses and wanted to go. So she was kind of on staff there,
okay.
Really, and then she just finished school while she was because she was 16, I believe, when she went out there.
Okay, got it. All right. So she wasn't the target audience for that school, because that school tends to target disciplinary, kids with troubles. And so she never went in there and was on the receiving end of all of that,
Right. Yeah, she kind of, again, floated above it a little.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. Okay, fair enough. Well, maybe I hope at some point she doesn't have horrible things happen to her, but I hope she twigs on, the untruth of the whole thing.
Well, yeah, and I think, she and I are going to talk a little bit more about what happened to me. I kind of gave her an idea at one point, and she's willing to talk about it. And so I'm hoping that eventually that will kind of help her see what, that's not, it's an institutional problem, not just like, an anecdote.
Exactly. It is a systemic issue there for sure.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now so now first off, you joined the Sea Org, you said what, 1994?
Yeah.
Okay, that's funny. 1 year before I did, I joined in 95. Where did you, so you were in Clearwater, was that, you joined at Flag?
Well, actually, I joined on the ship. So I went to the ship for Teen Week, which was a week for teenagers.
Okay.
And
how many people were there that week at the Teen Week?
Well, there were probably about maybe 30 of us.
Okay.
30 teenagers. I don't remember how many on the ship overall, but and a lot of them I knew because I went to a Scientology school. So I had graduated that year. I graduated on my 15th birthday from high school. So as part of my graduation present, my parents paid for half of it, and then I paid for the other half through like working a night job. And it was kind of just a present for me. So I went and, you know, I was partying and having tons of fun, and I don't even think I did a course while I was there. Oh. And yeah, and really, in retrospect, I think Teen Week was kind of just like a really clever scheme to get a lot of young people who qualified for the Sea Org on board the ship.
Exactly. I'm telling you right now, that's exactly what it was. Yeah. Look at all these eligible Sea Org qualified people.
Yeah, because we're young. All of us were young.
Oh, yeah.
You know? I mean, and I had an amazing time because I mean, there were tons of excursions, and I had a lot of friends, and we went to the beach, and I went horseback riding, and I went just everything. And so at the time, I was 15. I was, you know, I never had a boyfriend. I never, you know, I was kind of a late bloomer sort of. And there was this guy there that, the South African guy that started taking an interest in me, a Sea Org member.
He was Sea Org.
Yeah.
And he had an accent.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, he was South African anyway. So, you know, and at the time, I wouldn't say that he was being overly romantic at all, but he definitely was talking to me a lot, and he was tall and good looking. And I was this naive 15-year-old who was like, you know, ugly duckling kind of. And he recruited me.
Okay.
So, you know, I was already kind of, you know, wide-eyed and bushy-tailed. Like it was kind of the perfect storm because I was lucky that my parents were very loving and very kind of, you know, supportive of me and whatever I wanted to do. But they also ascribed to the belief, of course, that I was an adult in a little body. So here I am graduating high school on my 15th birthday. And instead of being like, hey, you're done with school, like, where do you think you would like to go to college and what do you want to do with your life? It was like, at the time I wanted to be a veterinarian. And I said, I want to be a veterinarian. And my parents were like, that's awesome. You can do that. Crickets.
Right. Reminds me of my Scientology parents at the time when I asked them one day about a college fund. I'd heard about this thing called college funds that parents do. I was like, college fund? Wow, really? And then I went up to them and I went, do I have a college fund? And they both just looked at me, and then they looked at each other, and then they just started laughing and laughing and laughing. They thought it was the funniest thing ever that I'd even asked.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I have a 13-year-old son currently who says he wants to become a doctor, and, you know, that may change, of course, but I'm sitting here going, okay, this is what you need to do. You know, you're going to be in high school next year, and you need to get these grades, and, you know, these are your options. And, you know, and it's like, I will say, just for my parents' sake, I mean, they look back and they're like, what were we thinking?
Oh, of course. My parents too. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah.
So, but it's like, I'm looking at him going, oh my God, you know, that was basically how old I was. So anyway, here I was, you know, wanting to save the world, 15 years old, no direction, you know, to speak of. And this super cute guy comes and says, you know, you can join the Sea Org. It's lots of fun. Look how much fun you're having this week, you know? And so I joined.
Okay. Was that the pitch? It's a lot of fun. This is what it's like all the time. What you're experiencing is what Sea Org members experience?
Yeah, kind of. He didn't say that in so many words, but it was kind of, he was being very like, you know, this, you know, you want, you know, the whole save the world speech, and you can have a higher purpose and stuff. And, you know, the ship is amazing as you can see.
Okay.
You know?
Okay.
Yeah.
So it was very much on the purpose line and clearing the planet. We're saving the world by sailing around on this ship and showing teenagers a good time. And this is what you should be doing.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny how you don't really think about it too much when you're that age. You know, you just kind of like accept this information. You know, oh yeah, of course they're saving the world by sailing around and showing teens a good time. You know?
Yeah, and I always had like a big, I had this craving to help people, and I was always, and so, I mean, it fed right into, actually, Chris, when I was 10, I walked into a recruiter's office at Flag and said I wanted to join the Sea Org.
Wow.
My mom was like, no, you're too young,
Yeah.
But like, I always had this, like, I just want to help people and I want to do good things. And so, it's like, it's kind of sick how that can be twisted around.
It is. And I can't really blame the recruiters. I mean, I'd like to, and sometimes I do, but really they're in it for the same reasons we were in it, same reasons tons of people were in it, which is
my last job on the ship was a recruiter, so we can get into that.
Oh yes. Okay, good. We will. Yeah. We will. Well, let's go ahead and talk about this. So did you go straight to the ship then? Yeah,
so I went home. I jumped out of the car from my vacation after I got picked up from the airport, and I said, I'm back, and I joined the Sea Org, and I'm leaving tomorrow.
Wow.
So, yeah.
And 15 years old.
Yeah.
And your parents said?
My mom said, no, you aren't. And my dad said, oh, just let her go.
Okay.
And I remember that was actually kind of a conflict between them, where my mom was really upset and crying and not wanting me to leave, from the viewpoint of, like, I think it's just motherly instincts kicked in. You're 15, like, this is insane. And my dad was like, no, let her go, have an adventure, do her thing. My parents actually were both in the Sea Org briefly in LA they were in the Sea Org when I was born.
Oh, and, really? Oh, I didn't get that they joined the Sea Org as part of their whole experience.
Yeah, they were, I guess, at PAC, and the Big Blue Building, right? I think. And they left when I was about 2. They took a leave of absence, and they came back to Alabama, where my dad is from originally. And then they kind of wrote to, my dad had a friend, I don't know, it was 70s maybe, or early 80s. I don't know if it was, something happened and they managed to just never come back, but they weren't blown. They did officially, it was fine. I don't know, something, anyway, that's what happened to them.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah.
Well, certainly in the late 70s and early 80s was a time of incredible confusion and flux for Scientology. So, for some people to slip through the cracks is not surprising at all.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
Interesting. Okay, so then that's funny because, wow, so your mom freaks out, your dad's okay with it. How far along at that point had your parents gotten in Scientology as far as the bridge progress?
I think my dad was clear, and my mom was grades. It's funny, neither of my parents never went past clear. My mom never made it to clear. I never made it to clear. As a funny anecdote, I had a friend who whose both parents were OT, 3 and 7, I think, and she came over to my house one day. She had been over to my house a bunch of times, and we were good friends. We've reconnected. She's out of Scientology now, too. And she recently told me that when she came to my house, she was like, oh, my gosh, your parents must be so OT. Because my parents were really friendly and loving and, my parents are really good people. And despite all the Scientology stuff, they were always so accepting and loving and, supportive. And so a lot of my friends who had OT parents who were just like, Scientology, like, came to my house and were like, oh my gosh, your parents are amazing.
Yes. Yes, I do. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, because I interviewed Tim and Sylvia, and they, DeWall, and they had been in Clearwater, and they talked about other parents in an area who were very harsh with their children as far as applying ethics conditions and
yeah, my parents didn't do that at all.
Right. Yeah. I sort of had a bit of a light experience with that. I had a few grueling exercises of doing liability conditions, but not as bad as some of the kids in Clearwater had it, according to what Tim and Sylvia were talking about. Anyway, yeah. Well, it's interesting. So I guess that probably is one reason why your folks aren't still in it. So then you went to the ship. How long did it take? Like, did you really go the next day?
Okay. Well, I went to the EPF maybe 2 days later or something like that, maybe within the week, at Flag, and I was on the EPF at Flag. I finished it in like 2.5, 3 weeks, whatever. And then probably a few days after I finished, I was on the ship.
Wow. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. That was before they put all the, I know later on they put a lot of restrictions. That was before all that. Before you.
Yeah, that's because going to the ship now is kind of like going to INT. There's a whole qualifications process you have to do, and lengthy sec checks. You have to have a production record that's like a year or two long, and you know, there's all kinds of safeguards to make sure only the right people go to work there.
Yeah, that was I got in before that.
Okay. And what happened? What was your how did they start you off? Now you're working on a ship. Mm-hmm. You're a Sea Org member. You've gone through the EPF, which is their version of boot camp. So now you've got your Sea Org basics learned as far as how to say yes or no, sir, and what that's all about. So then what? So
I had been promised to go on the TTC because I wanted to be an auditor.
Okay, and TTC is Technical Training Corps, which is when they put people in full-time training for technical posts like auditors and supervisors and the people who are going to be applying the tech to people all day. That's where they train them for that. So,
right. Yeah, and of course, the minute I get there, they say, no, we have this mission from INT, and you're not going to go on the TTC, and instead we're putting you in this newly formed call-in unit, so which is also in Div 4. So in my 15-year-old brain, I'm like, well, I'll be in Div 4, where auditors are, right? So anyway, in the call-in unit was myself and 2 other women, and our job was to call people who already had courses paid for and who hadn't come to receive them. So we would call them and say, come get your course, like you already paid for it, but of course they'd have to get a flight and pay for the room and board and all that as well, right? So so we were put in by this INT mission that was on the ship, and that was my first job.
All right. Tech services, they call it. Yeah, that was my first post too. That was the DTS. I was doing call-in. Know that drill.
Yeah. So the DTS was my immediate senior.
Director of Tech Services. So, okay, so you're doing call-in. How does that go? I mean, you're literally fresh on the boat. I mean, do you even understand the services that you're calling people in for? How did you get grooved into this? How long were you doing it?
So I did. So I've always, again, a double-edged sword. So because my parents were so supportive and loving and stuff, I've always been kind of an overachiever. And so, before I got to the ship, I had done Student Hat, and I had done, a bunch of like little courses that, up to 15. I think Student Hat was probably the biggest one I had finished, but I finished that in like 2.5 weeks. Right. I'm just like overachiever. So I understood what I was doing, but the pressure was insane because it wasn't an admission. We had this pressure to produce. My immediate senior was the call-in unit's supervisor, or the head of the call-in unit, and she was very, at the time I didn't realize this, but in retrospect, she's very verbally abusive, very emotionally abusive, face ripping, get in my face. One day she would be happy and literally something would set her off, and then she would just be completely, insane, right? Now, I realized she was getting lots of pressure too, but either way, so, I had never dealt with this because I was raised in a very calm, happy household. And so it like messed with me a lot. I mean, I would be like crying at night, every night. Anytime someone yelled at me in my face, I would just like start crying. I had no control over it because I'd never had anyone yell at me like that. Like no one had raised their voice to that degree. I'd been yelled at as a kid, but not in my face, red, like backing me into a corner, none of that.
Right.
So I was having immediate, like, I think it was the second or third week I was there, I was already having doubts about being there.
Wow, within just a couple weeks.
Yeah, because my, worldview is shattered. I was like, I was like, Scientology is happy and Scientology is positive and Scientology is this. And right away, I'm like, this is none of those things,
Did you have the idea at that time? Did you think this is an anomaly? This is these couple of people who are doing this to me, or did it start dawning on you that, wait a second, there's something wrong with this system?
I definitely, I thought at the time that these people were out tech.
Right. Okay.
That's what I thought.
In other words, they weren't following Scientology according to the way L. Ron Hubbard said to.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. And I definitely, again, looking back, the way that I see it now is that the things that L. Ron Hubbard said that were kind of off and weird, I sort of just ignored. And I took the things that helped me.
Right. It's called confirmation bias. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And so at the time I was like, he wouldn't have wanted it this way. This is not how, And so, and again, being the good student I am, I'm, not to toot my own horn, but when I can read and understand something and apply it really well. So I'm just like, this is wrong. This is wrong. I could like quote back tech, like, this is not how you're supposed to do it, sort of thing.
Well, was there anybody you could go to for recourse, or did you try to like go, hey, I think something's wrong with my senior or this situation, or anything like that?
No, because the int mission was putting so much pressure. There was nowhere to go. I will say that the DTS, so the Colin Unit senior, she never yelled at me. She was very good at like pushing the pressure back and kind of being calm and collect. And I give her a lot of credit because she never yelled at me once the entire time that I was there. And I know she was getting tons of pressure, and I know she was getting, I could just see it in her face. And, those people that just refuse to pass on the abuse, I give them all the credit in the world. So she was cool, but my immediate senior, not too cool.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's rough, being in that position and being a middle person in a position in a setup like that. I had tons of similar experiences myself. So then, how long did that last then? How long were you in that Colin unit? What happened?
So, I think I was there about a year, maybe a year and a half. It's hard to remember how long I was on certain posts, but I got busted from it because. So, well, let me back up.
Yeah.
A couple of things were happening. One, it's incredibly expensive to call from the ship. And so every week we would get a certain amount of, money in financial planning or whatever. And we would have that amount. And usually I would be out of money by about Monday. And so, but of course I still had to make it go right. And so what ended up happening is I would use my own money. So my grandmother actually died and left me like $8,000. And I used probably about 4,000 of that on post because I never had enough money and I had people screaming at me. And, it's like at the time I thought, well, I'm doing something wrong. I'm not making this money last long enough and I have to use this money on post because this is my fault. But of course, now I know that's bullshit. Anyway, so I used like half of my inheritance money for that. And I think like I started just not caring a little bit because it's like I was damned if I do, damned if I don't, So what ended up happening and why I got busted, it's just funny, is they were recording all the phone calls and someone that I had talked to a few times, had good rapport, and I'm like 16 at this point, like a 16-year-old kid. And he was like, no, I don't want to spend the money to come on the ship. And I was like, what are you, a cheapo? That's what I said, specifically. Okay, so at the time, I didn't even think anything of it because I had talked to this guy a few times and he laughed. He thought it was hilarious, And anyway, I get called in to the, this room. And I forget, it was above the DTS. I don't even remember that post now, but she's like, do you know why you're here? I'm like, no. And she plays the tape and I was like, oh, okay. And she was like, this is unacceptable, joking and degrading and all
Oh,
this
come
stuff.
on. Oh man, just
So,
okay. We have to. You have to explain that. Okay, explain joking and degrading because not everybody's going to understand what the problem with that is.
so basically, like joking, degrading is like making fun of something.
But but
Is the best way I
but
can
why
describe
is that
it.
such a bad thing in Scientology?
It's low tone, right? It's like I don't even remember.
Okay, well Hubbard
You
actually
explain it.
wrote a bulletin called
Right.
"Joking and Degrading,"
J&D.
right, or J and D. This is how they refer to it in the Scientology as J and D. And if you
Mm-hmm.
and he calls people who are jokers psychotic. He says if
Okay.
you're running around making jokes about things all the time, that's not a sense of humor, that's psychotic. And it's actually
Okay.
degrading the importance and seriousness of the activity, and therefore you're an enemy if you're making fun of things. And so the idea of having a sense of humor in Scientology is sometimes a little dangerous because
Right.
there are people who are of a bit of a fascist mindset who will pull this thing out and start using it on people who are trying to keep things light and airy and going in a sort of a fun way. They'll pull out J and D and go, "You're J and D because you're not serious like I am," and they'll get people in trouble for that. And that apparently is exactly what happened to you.
Yep, that's what happened. Which is funny because the guy thought it was hilarious and he didn't
Right.
mind and like and also now that I'm older, I mean that's kind of my sense of humor anyway, is kind of this blunt, you know. I don't know. So anyway, so I got put on the decks.
Wow, you got put on the decks
Like,
for that?
yeah.
Jesus, man, somebody really had it out for you. My God.
Well, I mean, so I kind of I don't know. I think the combination between having kind of the supportive childhood, so I had a high self-esteem, right? Like I was very confident, and then also understanding what I read, I kind of felt like a little bit, invincible, not in an overconfident way, but just sort of like felt very confident in what I knew. And so a lot of times, I think that really got to people because I wasn't I didn't allow myself, I will say, it's funny because, okay, so obviously I'm in therapy because, of what happened to me, and you'll see more as we go along. But even my therapist said this, where I didn't really often allow myself to be a victim. I fought back all the time and with their own weapons, right? So I definitely had a lot of people who were really annoyed with me all the time.
Okay. I was going to ask, how did you survive? The first week or two, you're like in this new environment where everything is literally insane and you're getting backed into corners, being yelled at.
Yeah.
And then a year later, you're getting busted. How did
Hmm.
you adjust to that? I mean, was it just sort of, okay, now I need to grow up? Or was it, this is how things are and they're kind of out tech, but I don't like it, but I'm going to have to live with it anyway? Or did you try correcting them, or like how did this roll for you?
I mean, sometimes I try correcting them with the tech, but honestly, I think what I really did is I just sort of like kind of separated myself from the environment, and I kind of, I made lots of friends with other people. There are a lot of kids my age there.
Oh.
So, I made friends, and I would just kind of focus on the positive stuff. And like, for example, we had watches where when the ship sailed, some of us would be doing certain jobs to help the ship sail. And I was a lookout, and I would be on the bridge, like the flying bridge, so like under the stars. And I had a friend who would be there with me, and it was gorgeous. Just no one yelling at you. You're under the stars. We would laugh and joke around and sing songs. I mean, at 2 a.m, right? But like, it's like I lived for those moments, I think. And the rest, I just kind of was like, okay, this is just filler. Like, I'm just going to live for these moments. I would play like at our 20-minute lunch, there was an Australian guy who we'd always play like silly games with. And he was really into cinema. So we would talk about that and, just I also ate a lot. I gained like 30 pounds while I was there because I was like eating like bread constantly. I mean, I used it as a coping mechanism, honestly, just constantly like shoving my face. I would like sneak food and like shove my face with food and I mean, just eat the most. I would put like sugar on bread and like, I was just, I mean, now I know that's what I was doing as well,
Yeah, you went straight to the ship. I guess you were on the EPF for a couple weeks. Did you ever go to other bases? I ask because I'm curious. I've been told that the food on the Freewinds is amazeballs, like
it's good,
amazingly good. And having come up in PAC where the food is amazingly bad most of the time, I was just curious, was that true or was that just for the public that got the good food and the crew got the...
No, we had great... most of the time we had really good food. There were times we were on rice and beans, but because of stats. But yeah, most of the time we always had like fresh fruit, and I didn't know that we were different than other places. I was only on the ship my entire time.
Right. Okay.
So, but yeah, no, the food was great. I have no complaints.
Okay.
in that direction. And that's how I gained 30
munching
pounds.
on the comfort food. Okay, got it. So, okay, so then when you get busted, so what, I mean, are there any other things that happened during that first year, which I imagine was not, fun with the, being in tech call-in and not being able to even do call-in, spend your own money. I mean, that's pretty silly circumstances. Anything else happened during that time we should know about?
No, I just remember it as a grind,
Yes.
That's it. That's really it. But no, nothing crazy happened. Just, the normal up and down, getting in trouble when your stats are down, staying up all night on, Wednesday night, stuff like that. Right. Just your typical, I mean, it's so silly, but yeah, it's just your typical stuff.
And the tools, now this is 1994, 1995, so there's no internet, there's no email, the tools you have to get people to the ship are the phone and letters.
Yeah, we literally had like one of those old printouts, like the the dot matrix printers, and we just had like one and a highlighter. We would just, go through.
Call. That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, got it on that. So then, what happened after you got busted? You're on the decks. What does that mean, and what happened?
So I was, I worked in the engine room, some cleaning, and I kind of worked just basically cleaning. Nothing at this point super hard labor. I mean, like I would clean the decks, and sweep the decks and stuff like that. But basically what they wanted me to do was just, go through my conditions. I was assigned a lower condition, and I forget which enemy probably. And then I just basically worked through my conditions, and then they assigned me to being a cabin cleaner. So that was my next job. I was a cabin cleaner.
Did you get, when you got busted, I'm curious, did you get a committee of evidence, which is what you're supposed to get if you're actually on a post and you're supposed to get removed? You're not supposed to just be able to verbally take you off a post.
No.
Okay.
Don't be ridiculous.
Okay, just curious. All right, so you're busted for this incautious comment joke. So you spend weeks doing conditions and stuff, and then you're cleaning?
Yeah, I was cabin cleaner. Okay. So, very little. I mean, that was, I will say the best part about that is I was working by myself all day and people just left me alone. So, I found actually that working in the ship org was much more just calm and sort of, less pressure than the tech org, because the ship org focused kind of on the secular side of things, just running the ship. And so even though a lot of times I had way more cabins than I should, and this is irony too, the entire ship was always like, we didn't have enough passengers. Like they wanted us to be at, I think, 350 at all times, which is how much they have on Maiden voyage. But the irony in this is during Maiden voyage, we would be up, all of us, all night doing 3 different posts. We would be sleeping in like the course room because all of the people from INT would be sleeping in our cabins, right? So we would be sleeping in the course room, or we'd be sleeping in the galley or whatever. And we would have to have like 3 more people helping with the cabins, for example, and I think during Maiden voyage, I was a cabin cleaner and then I was a waitress at night, because so like we were at full capacity 1 week a year and we could hardly keep up with the amount of crew we had. So we would always get this, the ship doesn't have enough people on it. But, in my mind, I'm like, we would never sleep if we had enough people.
Right. How many, so 350 is about maxing out on that ship in terms of passengers. How many crew were there? Now, let's just, for anybody who's not going to get this, on the ship, you have two activities going on. Activity number one is running the ship. And activity number two is delivering services to Scientologists who come to the ship. And the crew who are running the ship are not the same people who are delivering the services. They're two different organizations, right? Yeah, two different orgs. Yeah. And with different hierarchy and different command personnel. So the guy who is actually captaining the ship, Napier, right? I think his name is. Yeah, that guy's not the one who's telling the people who are servicing Scientologists what to do. He's telling the engine room what to do. He's telling the deck crew what to do. He's telling hey, these cabins aren't clean. That's his area. Whereas you have this other woman, Sharon Weber, who's running the service organization, and she doesn't interfere with how the ship gets run. Her job is to get people there and service them.
Yeah, no, when I got there, she wasn't in charge yet when I first got there. It was Milt Wolf.
Milt Wolf, okay.
Yeah, he was in charge. And he seemed actually really nice. I mean, I never had to deal with him directly, but like he was, you kind of know, like I never saw him yell at anyone, and other people may have had a bad experience with him, but he got knocked. Like there was some sort of big to do, I don't remember at this point, but like he got basically like knocked off of his post and I think sent up lines, or not up lines to be up lines, but like away. Okay. And then Sharon, who was the director of inspections and reports at the time.
Oh, that's like the chief ethics officer person. That's person over all the ethics. In other words, the hard ass.
Like the head of the Gestapo, exactly. Basically. Yeah. Yeah, she was put in as
the CO. Wow.
In charge. Mm-hmm.
Of course she was. Okay. Yeah, because she's hardcore, man. She does these ethics seminars, and she's just like, brr.
Oh, she's horrible. Oh, she's the worst. She's also kind of like that. Again, she can be very nice, and then the next second she is just laying into you. I mean, that, to me is worse. Like if she was always horrible, then at least you know what to expect, right? But like you're kind of shielding yourself, and then she comes in, she's like, "Hey, how are you doing today?" And you're like, "Oh, I'm doing great." Why would you say that to me? It's like, then you're like,
right? Because you're always on eggshells around such people.
Yeah, it's abusive.
That's exactly what it is. It's extremely abusive.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to make it clear on those two organizations, so you had been busted from the service side of things, from the service org, to the ship org, and you're doing all this cleaning and stuff. Okay, so then how many crew were there in the ship org, in the running the ship part?
Maybe I would say about 100. I don't know exactly,
about that.
Probably 100, 150 at the very most, and then kind of the same on the other side too, 100, maybe a little less.
Okay, so about 250 to 300 people working on the ship at any one time.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. And what was the berthing situation like for you? In other words, what you had a cabin? You were with other people? What was that?
I was in a dorm. So I was in a dorm that was probably, I don't know, I'd say at the 200 square feet, maybe. And there were 6 people in it. So they were bunk beds, right? So there was literally enough room for you to walk in, take a left, and then there were lockers in between the bunk beds on the walls.
Okay, so you had a locker for your stuff.
Yeah, a locker, yeah.
I guess there wasn't, and during that, during that first year, like, how do you take a day off when you're on the ship? I mean, if your stats are up and you take a Liberty Day, do you get to go ashore, or are you on the ship? Like, is the ship regularly on shore, or is it out in the ocean a lot? How does the schedule work on that?
It's mostly actually docked.
Oh. Okay.
So normally there were times that that usually they tried to schedule the sailing for nighttime when people are asleep, so I think so people wouldn't get seasick.
Oh, okay.
You know. And then there were times where we would travel maybe like from one set of islands, like we would stay in a set of islands. So like Aruba, Bonaire, Curacao, the ABC island. So we would go from island to island, kind of stay somewhere 2 days, hop the island, right? And then we would do that for a few weeks. And then maybe we would move on to a different set of islands. So we would move on to like the West Indies. So we'd go to Barbados, Antigua, that area. There was one other there, but I forget. And we would travel there. So like maybe going from the ABCs to the West Indies would be a day travel. So we would do that during the day. Of course, it would be full day, but most of the time we would travel at night. So during the day, like rarely, but I did have a few times where I had the day off. And I would go on the ship, and those days were fun. Sometimes I would even have a friend who was off too. And, we would go, just explore the island and kind of be a tourist for a little while. And, it was actually, that was fun.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I was just kind of curious about the lifestyle, like what's it like being a regular ship, crew member? Cause it's not like everybody's, down, what's the word? Pinholing all day, every day, or down in the engine room, cleaning, really nasty, horrible hot pipes and gunk. I mean, there are some pleasant times, but it's in the world of
like the
Sea Org, so
Right. The stereotypical day is we would wake up early, we'd eat breakfast, and then we would do ship drills. So we would either lower the lifeboats and raise them, and even if you were in the tech org, you still had jobs that if there was an emergency or when we were sailing that were kind of all hands, and you would do kind of ship type stuff. So like I was the lifeboat engineer, so I would like start the engine and stuff like that, and we would lower them sometimes, or we would do these drills where you would pair up with someone and go down to your cabin, and then you would be blindfolded and have to find your way back up to the top deck to your lifeboat, crawling and blindfolded, in case of a fire, that sort of thing. And then we would do that, and then we would have, our cleaning stations, of course, and then do that for clean whatever little place was assigned to us. And then we would get ready for the day and then start on post. And I think we would be on post by 9. So that gives you an idea of how early we started.
Wow.
And then, 20, 30 minutes for lunch, and then we'd have dinner, and then supposed to have exercise at night, and that never happened. And then we're supposed to be off at like 10, right? But I don't even remember that ever happening.
Right. So, I know that drill. All right.
Yeah. So that's kind of the typical. And then we would have like every Saturday we'd have CSP in the morning, clean ship program. And
you were literally clean ship program. Like we just called it that. We were on land. We were like, we're CSP time. Yeah, whatever. We're doing our laundry and grocery shopping.
Right. Yeah.
Getting back to your time track here. So what happened after you were cleaning? How long did that go on? And
it wasn't too long. It was, I would say maybe a year or less. I was young. I didn't have a lot of, ethics history in general, just because I had never been an adult. And so, as you know, they like young people for certain posts because we qualify for them, right? So,
yeah, you haven't gotten into too much trouble.
Yeah. So they put in a new switchboard on the ship, and they put me in, so I was promoted, right, to HCO.
Okay.
And I think I was still in the ship organization, but I was in HCO in the ship organization, and I became the switchboard operator. So if you called the ship, probably around 1996 to 1998 or 9, I was the person that you spoke to.
Got it. And HCO is what?
Hover Communications Office. Man, it's like trivia. so long ago.
I know. Just for people who are watching, I just like to keep the terminology.
No,
There's so much of it. Division 1, HCO. It's the division that is responsible for in the organization for hiring people, for ethics, and for distributing all the communications throughout the organization, all the dispatches and telexes and phone calls. All of that is handled by HCO. Okay.
Yeah.
So
I was there for a few years.
Okay, switchboard operator.
Yeah, and honestly, that was smooth sailing because it was easy. All I had, I think my stats were like calls routed or something like that, and I mean it was just so easy. It was like pushing buttons, and and I just drew all the time, basically, and I mean it was. If I could have done that forever, I would probably, I mean, I'm lucky I didn't do that forever because I might still be in, you know what I mean? Like, because just, I mean, I kind of flew under the radar there, right? So, so I did that. And also around that time, so the ship had, the way that, I don't know how they do it now, I'm sure it's similar, but the way that they would get kind of mail and packages from the ship to land and vice versa is they would actually send a physical courier. So they would buy a plane ticket for a crew member, and that crew member would check all of this luggage that were big trunks full of mail and packages and stuff like that, right? And we just paid the fee for the extra heavy luggage. And sometimes it was like 5 or 6, right? And we would just fly to Clearwater where the ship office was, and then drop off that stuff, and then fly back to the ship and take mail back. So the ship org, I think, was responsible for that. I can't really remember, but anyway, I started being sent out every now and then as the courier.
Oh.
So my immediate senior would cover my post because he had others. He couldn't really leave the ship. He had other, irons in the fire, I guess. And he would basically send me as a courier. So the fortuitous thing about that is my parents lived in Clearwater. And so because of that, I would drop off the stuff and my parents would pick me up and I would spend the night with them and see them and see my little brother and my little sister. And then I would go back the next day. So that also made it a little bit more, palatable being there because, of course, I think I took one vacation the entire time I was on the ship. So, but I got these little tidbits of my family and, stuff like that. And of course, I think I was 18 at the time, or 17 even, and I was flying, and I mean, how it is, like you get away from everyone. I mean, even being able to walk through the airport with no one talking to you and like, oh, I'm gonna get a burger and sit and talk to the bartender, like just being able to do that, you feel human again briefly, right?
Was it that much of a contrast for you at this point that you were like really seeing that you were in this whole little world that was not like the rest of the world?
I already knew it was not like the rest of the world, but I thought that that was unnecessary because we were doing, God's work.
Right.
I didn't call it that time, of course, but like I felt like that was like a badge of honor. I was still kind of on the thing, especially at that point because I was kind of protected from a lot of the insanity at that post, and so I felt like, I was kind of elitist about it. I probably, like, yes, these people are so at ethics and they're, these cute little wogs or whatever, But at the same time, I got to, get a piece of pizza with no one and eat at my leisure when I had a 2-hour layover, right? So like those things were really nice. So I was kind of getting a little bit of the best of both worlds,
Did you ever have to route calls from Miscavige or other senior people?
So I didn't. I don't remember them calling in. But definitely during Maiden voyage, they would call the switchboard, and I would have to page people all the time. So, I would talk to Guillaume Lesev. I talked to Ron Miscavige, not senior, but Ronnie.
David Miscavige's brother.
Yeah, MEI, right? Marketing exec is who he was at the time. A lot of people from Gold. Like during Maiden voyage, I talked to all of them briefly. I mean, I would just route calls all the time and page people constantly over the loudspeaker, you know, and stuff like that. So, and then when this is funny. When I was this is later on, I did meet David Miscavige one time. Okay. And ironically, he was very nice to me, but I can tell you about that. So basically after that period of about 2 years, I got promoted. And this time, I got promoted to Sea Org Recruitment Officer.
Okay. All right. So now you're the one who's getting people into the Sea Org.
Right. So I'm about 18, 19
at
this point. 18, I think. Yeah, 19.
Was that guy who recruited you a Sea Org recruitment officer, or was he just doing that as just part of Teen Week?
He was just doing it part of Teen Week. Yeah, he wasn't. And by this point, I think he's gone.
Oh, he'd left. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So the Sorrow post, the wonderful, awesome, amazing Sorrow post. Yeah. Oh God! Talk about going from near invisibility on the switchboard to right on the frying pan.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, again, and I went from, you know, the call-in unit where you couldn't win to the Sorrow where you couldn't win, because at the same point, probably a few months 6 months maybe after I got to Sorrow, they implemented all of those, you know, stops to being able to get to the ship.
Oh, the whole qualifications thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And so people are constantly pressuring me to get people on the ship because they need this post filled or this post. And I'm like, well, I got, you know, 4 people in the last 3 months onto the EPF, but they're just sitting there. And, you know, that's not on me, you know? So it's like, I'm getting all this pressure and I'm like, why don't you go talk to them? Like, this is nothing I can do, you know?
Nope, it's on you. Get them through that EPF faster. Yeah. Go, go, go. Well, if you had more people, on the EPF, then they'd be going through faster.
Right. Or they would be done with the EPF and just sitting in the ship office in Clearwater, just waiting to come to the ship, you know? And it's like, what am I, you know? So it was just funny. But I actually recruited, I don't know if you talked to her, but Ramona, do you know Ramona Dinas Browning?
I don't know her, no.
She was, okay, she lives in Australia and with Valeska. You know who Valeska is, right? Yeah, Valeska and I were roommates. I did not recruit her, of course, but we were roommates briefly. Okay. And she and I became really good friends. And so Ramona, I recruited, and she has come and spoken out on Australian, like 2020 and stuff with Valeska. They know each other, of course. So she was about 15 when I recruited her, 16, and I recruited her along with a guy in CMO, Commodore's Messengers Organization, so he was, you know, higher than me, and then she ended up marrying him, and anyway, she was in longer than me. I left and she stayed in, and she ended up going up to CMO on the ship, and so the irony is I recruited her, and she actually ended up coming on the ship quickly because it was right before all of those qualifications, and she ended up being senior to me.
Oh, sure. Recruiter senior, that happens.
Yeah, so she ended up being like kind of a hard ass to me a bunch of times, you know, but whatever. I recruited her, so I deserve it.
Okay. All right, I get that. Now, so how long did you stay a recruiter?
So I was a recruiter until the day I blew.
Okay, good, and we will get to that. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Now, how were you taught to recruit Sea Org members?
There's a book, actually it's a secular book that I was made to read, and now I can't remember it. It was something about selling
Big League Sales?
What?
Big League Sales Closing Techniques by Les Dane?
Yes, that's it.
Yes.
Thank you.
That is the sales manual for Scientology.
Yeah, so I read that and I just used that, basically. I mean, honestly, Chris, I was pretty good at it, comparatively. Like, I didn't have huge stats, but I was better. I actually had, I was told at one point that I recruited more people than any Sorrow before me. And I will say that I felt like at the time, I never did any of these things where you lock someone in a room and don't let them leave till they sign a contract or any of those things. Like, I was really good at just like selling the dream, it's like, don't you want to help people? The planet's going to shit. Like, this is how you do it. Like, that sort of thing. And which I kind of still believed at the time.
Well, I was wondering about that. Like, how much exposure did you have to the planet to know that it was going to shit? And how did you present that to people?
Well, I didn't have a lot of exposure to the planet, but, I guess I'd been told that so many times myself, I believed it, and just kind of this sort of naive, just wish to help the world. I still had it, and I still wanted other people, I still believed Scientology was the only way to help. I really did. So, like, even though I had, the start was pretty rough, and then it got better. And so by this point, I'm pretty like chill, and I'm pretty, good. And it didn't get like, it kind of all came to a head. And that's when I was just like, oh my God, like, something had to happen for me to kind of have this moment where I was just like, screw all of this. And so we'll get to that, I'm sure. But anyway, so at this point, I still I believed what I was selling.
Right. Right. It's very hard to be a recruiter and not. Yeah, it's very hard to be on the fence or not want to be there and keep doing that work. Was there any other, I'm just curious, was there any other training you had or seminars you went to or anything like that to be a recruiter, or did you just kind of have a knack for it?
Yeah, I think I just had a knack for it. I was outgoing, and I was young and, friendly, and it just kind of, at the time I thought I was doing a really bad job, of course, because I was getting yelled at constantly and nothing was ever enough.
Well, that's the thing.
Right?
It doesn't matter how much you produce, it's never enough.
Yeah, but yeah, I just went out and talked to people, and it's funny too because I had a very limited pool from which to talk to because.
Well, I was going to ask you, like, did you ever have times when there was just no one on the ship qualified to recruit?
Yeah, what would end up happening on occasion is we would have ship missions out to try to get people to the ship, and sometimes they would have someone there that they found right for the picking, and they would have them call me, and we would kind of do like a tag team in that respect. So I did that a couple of times. But yeah, there were times where it's like, what am I going to do? Just busy work or whatever. And there were times where like I would just falsify my stats, like, this guy started the EPF and CLO East US or whatever, and maybe he hadn't quite, it's like, it didn't happen a lot, but like, there were definitely times where like it was just like I needed them off my back, and I knew that they didn't start like right before 2, but they started like the next day or whatever. It's like nothing, like I didn't make anyone up, but it definitely like whatever. Right. So but overall everyone was everyone I recruited was real.
Okay. How many do you know average or estimate how many folks you recruited into the Sea Org?
If I had to guess, I don't know how many actually like made it like through the EPF and stuff, but I would probably say I recruited probably 50 to 75 people in about 3 years.
Yep.
I think.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And okay, good. So then, and was Sharon down on you often on that?
Oh yeah, yeah. She was. So this is a good segue into the time I met David Miscavige. Okay, so Sharon was just like the big gnat that would never go away, always on me, right? If my stats were up that week, maybe I'd have like a little bit of reprieve, but even if my stats were up that week, if I wasn't in like an upward trend overall, still, right? So she was always on me, yelling at me constantly, just, so it was Maiden voyage, and so David Miscavige usually does kind of his rounds where he'll go from department to department. So it's like, oh, the buzz, it's like COB's coming. So I'd never met him, and of course I thought that he was wonderful at that time. And we're all standing next to our stat graphs that are nicely displayed, and he comes in, and at this point, literally probably an hour prior, I was getting my face ripped off by Sharon Weber for not having had enough recruits, right? Because it was Maiden voyage. So I'm supposed to be recruiting all these OTAs, right? So anyway, right. So I'm standing there and COB comes in and he looks, I shake his hand and I introduce myself and whatever. And he looks at my stats and he goes, your stats are in normal. That's very well done. Good job. You're doing a really good job. And Sharon Weber's like, oh yeah, she's doing a great job.
I'm a sycophant, right? Man. I hate that crap.
Yeah.
And it's unavoidable in that environment. I mean, Sharon had no other choice, but Jesus.
I know. Yeah, and I was just like in my head, I'm like, I knew Sharon Weber was a douche, right? I already knew that. So like in my head, and I didn't have any respect for her. She had been married like 3 times, and she was like really rude to her husbands. Like I would see this stuff, wow. Right? And thank God for my parents for like, I mean, bad that they raised me in Scientology, but thank God that they raised me in an environment that at least I could spot abusive behavior. I could see what was like abnormal and not okay, and like apart from Scientology, yep. Right? Just because my parents love each other too, like they're nice to each other, Anyway, so yeah, so I had to kind of, I didn't want her wrath, so I would listen to her and do what she said, but I had zero respect for her as a person.
And that's a really important point that the authoritarians miss all the time, 100% of the time. They miss it. They think that your fear is respect,
right.
And it has nothing to do with it.
Yeah, and she would always, I would get in trouble constantly also because I was always kind to people, even if they were in trouble. So like if someone was on the decks, right, I would still say hi to them. I would ask how they were doing, if they were doing okay. Valeska reminded me of this, but one time she was, upset because she was, away from her parents and family and being hidden on the ship, which I didn't realize that was going on at the time. And I brought her some ice cream. And when we got back in touch after, which was like about a year ago or something, she's like, I always remember that you brought me ice cream, because I was, so I was always like, looking out kind of for the little guy. Or if one of my friends was on the decks, I wasn't going to be a dick to them. They were my friend, right? So I wouldn't like buddy with them, but I would be like, hey, I hope you're doing okay. I hope you come back and join us, so kindness, right? So I remember this one time there was a guy, I forget his post, but he was an officer and higher than me, and for some reason he was on the decks. So when you're on the decks, like if people in good standing walk by you, you're supposed to like go to the side and let them walk past you, right? So this guy who had always been very nice to me, even, he was above me or whatever, I'm walking by and he, goes to the side, and I never made it to officer or anything, I forget, but I said, hey, how are you doing? Are you okay? And said hi to him and then walked by, literally like a 3-second exchange. And Sharon Weber comes around the corner and she's like, why the hell are you talking to him? Just yelling in my face. And I remember that was a turning point for me, because I remember thinking like, if you can't be kind to someone when they're having trouble, right, then how are you going to help people?
Exactly.
And so that really, I feel like that was what started. I'd had doubts throughout, being there, just moments of doubt, but that was when I started really kind of, maybe this is not what it seems.
Right. There you go.
Because I wasn't the only one who did that. I was one of the only ones, that's what I was going to say, who was kind to people when they were down. Right. People would my friends when I was on the decks would walk by like they didn't know me.
Right. And it was obviously not only encouraged to do that, but people were punished if they were kind.
Right. And I was punished numerous times.
Right.
And I wouldn't stop doing it, because I was just like, this is, in my mind, I was like, this is not, I don't think I'll, at the time so now I'm like separating myself a little from the church, but I'm still kind of like, this is not what LRH intended, right? I'm just like, okay, this whole system is broken, is what I thought at the time.
And of course, when you learn how Hubbard ran the ship, you find out, no, the system's not broken. That's exactly how he ran it.
Right, now I know that.
But at the time...
And that's why it took...
Yeah, you have this whole other vision of what Hubbard was all about because of what you're told when you're in the church.
Right.
No, Hubbard would have loved
Yeah.
Sharon Weber. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure. Now that I know more, yes, I know that. That's why it took me. So I left when I would almost turn 21. I left in the Freewinds, the Sea Org, and then I finally got out for good. And then it took me a few more years to disabuse myself of the entire,
Right.
Yeah,
of
religion.
Course.
Yeah.
Okay, so how did this go from doubts and reservations and wait a second, something's wrong here to I'm getting the fuck out and you blow? I mean, that's something, especially from the ship. How'd you do it?
Okay, so this is a really adventurous story. So what happened was my parents had planned since I was very little. My dad is very enamored by the Southwest and the Grand Canyon and stuff. So they had planned this family trip that my dad had been telling me about since I was 10 years old to go out to, this huge family trip to go out to Arizona and the Grand Canyon and Las Vegas and all of that. So here I am, I think I was 19 or 20, and my dad says, okay, we're all going. And so I'm like, I'm going too. So I put in my leave, 3 weeks.
Wow, you went for the whole tamale, the whole enchilada.
Because I up until this point, I think I had taken 2 1-week leaves.
Okay.
Yeah. In almost 6 years, right? Which is pretty good.
That's a whole lot more leaves than I ever got in 17 years, but okay.
Yeah, exactly. So again, this is me being a thorn in people's side, right? This is the policy. I'm supposed to get these, Anyway, so so I get my leave approved. Okay. And I'm ready to go. I have my plane ticket bought, everything. I used some of the last part of my grandmother's inheritance to, my parents bought my plane ticket, but to for extra stuff, I'm ready for my vacation, whatever. And of course, they don't start the leaving sec check till a day before I'm supposed to go.
Right. Always last minute.
So I can't get I can't get through it. And maybe it was 2 days before. So then the next day, I'm told by the LRH comm, the LC, that I can't go.
Wow.
My stats are down that week. So I'm not allowed to go. I call my mom, upset, and I tell her, and my mom calls the ship. My parents are in great standing, right? My mom calls the LRH comm, and the LRH comm tells her that I knew all along that I wasn't going to be able to go.
Oh, come on.
Right.
Oh, so man.
That I was never going to be able to go. Ever. And that I was lying to my mom about it. Right?
So the LRH comm literally shifts the entire blame to you for her bullshit.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Wow. Who was that?
Jane Locke.
I don't know who that is. Okay.
So my mom, right before muster, I think it was morning muster, my mom calls me. And I was like, did you talk to her? And I was expecting my mom to be yeah, I talked to her and you're going to be able to go or whatever, right? And instead, my mom lays into me. She believed her, right? And she is like, you knew this is bullshit. You knew this whole time. I can't believe it. You lied. And I'm just tears streaming down my face, just so upset. And I'm trying to convince her I didn't know. And she didn't believe me, right? Which now she's, of course, feels horrible about. But, and I don't know, it was something snapped inside of me. The place that I was talking to her was actually where the public talked to people too. It's the public phones, and I was just tears streaming down, crying, and so public could kind of see me or whatever, and someone asked me if I was okay, Anyway, I get off the phone with her and I go up to muster. It was Saturday, that's why it was after CSP or whatever. I go up to muster. And after muster's over, in front of everyone, I walk up to the LRH comm and I lay into her.
At the muster?
Yeah.
Oh, damn. And now get this, people, because this is important. The LRH communicator is a job that it's called a network job in the organizational structure of Scientology. And the LRH comm is at an equal footing with the commanding officer of the organization. The LRH communicator
Right.
is not under Sharon Weber. She does not take orders from anybody on that boat. The LRH communicator is supposed to be there to ensure that L. Ron Hubbard's policies and tech are in full force and are being applied standardly across the ship. That's the only reason that person is on post. And so she takes the coward's route when she gets confronted on her bullshit on your leave by shifting the blame to you. And then you, as a lowly crew member, not even a div head, you're a Sorrow, you're like down in a department, right? Yeah. You stand up at a muster in front of God and everybody and tell her what's for.
Yeah, right after muster ended and everyone's about to disperse, and I just like walk right up to her.
That was seriously ballsy.
I just was like, what are you going to do to me? You know, I just like, you know, I mean, really their big mistake is they underestimated the fact that I had a good relationship with my family. You know, and I'm allowed to curse.
Oh yeah, go right ahead. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they fucked with it. So like, I went up to her and like, everyone's kind of like talking to each other because it was right after muster, and I just went up to her and I said, what the fuck did you say to my mom? And she was like, oh, I just told her the truth, you know, and I was like, no, you fucking didn't. And I just was like, you know, you fucking asshole. What, you know, you fucking lied to her.
Whoa.
You're a fucking liar.
Awesome.
And so everyone like stops and like looks at what's going on. And I was like, fuck you and fuck you and fuck you. And I just like walked away.
Wow. Nice.
So I was walking on the upper deck. So that's where we have muster. So there aren't a lot of passengers there. And so I walk away, and immediately the dry R at the time, I forget his name, but he actually was a really nice guy. He was way too nice for that position. He comes up to me, right? And he says, Leah, you're going to have to come with me. And I look at him and I'm like, I said, I know, I'm not coming down with you right now. I'm going to chill out for a little bit. And he goes, no, you have to come with me right now. I said, if you make me come with you right now, I will make a scene and every fucking passenger on this ship will hear me. So you have two choices. You can go away and wait for me to come down, or you can let everyone know what the fuck just happened. And he was like, all right, I'll see you in a few minutes.
Smart boy. Yes. Wow. So you had definitely hit a breaking point here.
Oh, I was like, in my mind, I was like, what's the worst? Hit me. What's the worst you can do to me? And I didn't at all for one moment think that I would get declared or anything like that, because I still felt like the tech was on my side, right? I mean, they lied. That's out tech. Right. You can't do that. Right. So I went down to the dry R, and I was put on like heavy, you know, engine room only work, you know, like cleaning scavenger spaces. Let me explain what that is. So the engines of a ship that size are multi-storied, right? So they have decks built around each story kind of the engines, and they have parts of the engines that are hard to clean. And one of the part is the scavenger space, and I'm probably, an engineer would tell me I'm doing this wrong, but basically it's like where the diesel fuel, heavy fuel oil essentially gets deposited in this space that's about this big, and you have to clean it out. And so basically you clean it out, but it's like toxic fumes, and the only thing that disperses heavy fuel oil is diesel fuel. So you go up there and you use a rag soaked in diesel fuel, and you basically like scoop out like this goop. Right? So your hair gets, I mean, you just get covered in this stuff, and the only way you can get it off yourself, or I was told, was using diesel fuel. So you take like a sponge bath in diesel fuel, and then you wipe that off of you, or you take a shower. So, I mean, it's like the worst job. They give like the real people who mess up, you know, that job. So like, I was doing that, and I was just, you know, okay. So of course my parents go on vacation without me, right? And it was like I was just like, I had the resolve. I was just on a mission, and I was like, I'm getting the fuck out. Like, I'm leaving. Like, fuck these people. So what ended up happening is I faked my way up the conditions.
Okay.
And it took me about 2 weeks. I was just like on it, right? And my mind was, I'm going to get up the conditions. I'm going to be somehow sent on a courier run where I'm going to have my passport, and then I'm going to get the fuck out, right? So that's what happened.
So it is true then that they confiscate your passports?
Yeah. Yeah, you don't have your passport on the ship. And they say it's because the port captain needs it for when we sail and dock. I don't know if that's true.
I doubt
or not.
it.
Yeah, I doubt it.
Because I don't think that happens on passenger cruises.
Yeah, exactly. So here's where like the adventure begins. Okay, so I had a little bit of money left from my grandmother, and I 2 days after I went up the conditions, I got sent on a courier run.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I was like,
okay.
So what I did is I started my plan in motion. So I'd always wanted to go to Italy, and I'd made friends with some people. Yeah, I know. This is where the adventure begins. And I made some friends with some passengers on Italy week who I knew lived there, and I had their numbers, right? So what I ended up doing is they sent me on my courier run. I dropped the shit off at the office, and I went to my parents' house like normal. I booked myself a flight to Italy the next day.
Wow.
So I stole my parents' credit cards just in case. And then I didn't tell them at all about my plan. They were obviously back from...
Oh, they had come back by this point. Okay.
Yeah, and this is probably like 3 weeks.
Okay.
Later. Maybe
so your folks are there. Did you manage to resolve things with your mom at this point, or?
I don't remember an exact time that we resolved it, but she wasn't mad at me anymore. So I don't know if she like ended up believing me. I don't know what happened, but anyway, so the next day, I instead of going back to the ship, I get on a flight to Italy.
Wow.
I'm going and having some fun. So I went to Italy.
I'm out. So you're totally, I'm out.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was 20 at this point. So I did a few things, right? Because I had been in HCO long enough to know what happens when someone blows. Not exactly, but I had an idea. So I wanted to give myself as much leeway as I could. So a couple things happened. One, I was sitting in the Miami airport because I think I went from like Tampa to Miami to Chicago, something like that, and then to Italy. And I'm sitting in the airport, and I knew that my flight was supposed to arrive at the island the ship was on at like 10 or 11 that morning, and then the ship was going to a different island and was going to be there at like 6 at night. So I called the ship and told them my flight had been delayed, and that I rerouted it to the other island. So that way I knew that they wouldn't know. Right. I knew they wouldn't figure out that I was gone until I was already in the air to Italy. Right. So they couldn't like get me to the airport or something. Smart. Yeah. So I did that. So, I mean, for the next 10 days, I went to Italy, and I went to like Rome. I went on vacation.
Did anyone have any idea where you were?
No. Not that I know of. Now, I called my parents, I think the second day, I called from a payphone in Florence. I left a message on their answering machine, and I said, I took your credit cards just for emergency purposes. I never used them. I can't tell you where I am, but I'm safe.
Wow. And of course, at this point, they're still in Scientology.
Yes, and I found out later that they had already been visited by Sea Org members. Where is Leah? And they didn't know because I didn't tell them.
Right. And you weren't using their credit cards, so there was no trace yet.
Yeah. No, I just stole one. I thought just in case I get myself into a pinch, right? Like I'll have, but I never used it. I had enough money. But yeah, so I didn't want anyone to be culpable. Yep. Right. So that's why I didn't tell them where I was, because I knew they would feel conflicted, right? So I just said I'm safe. Anyway, so I had an awesome time in Italy. I met up with that guy that I knew from the ship, from the passenger. I told him I was on LOA. He was he was employed by modeling agencies to be a chaperone for models in Milano.
That was his job?
That was his job.
What a job! So oh my God!
So I stayed at his house, really his parents' house, because they stay with their parents until they're, whatever. And they thought I was just on leave, and I went out to like clubs, with these models,
Yeah.
and just, I had an awesome time.
Wow.
I went to Rome, I went to Florence, and I just traveled by myself all around Italy. And when I was in Milan, I stayed with him, and when I traveled to like Rome and Florence, I was by myself. I went to Venice, and just, I don't know, just had a great
acted
time.
like a normal person in Italy.
Yeah, totally. I have a lot of really great pictures. So anyway, 10 days later, I go back, right? And I'm thinking at this point, I'm going to go back to the ship and route out properly, because I know that I can't be declared, right? So this is all like cognizant, purposeful decisions. I did 10 days because I wasn't sure where the cutoff was of the unreasonable amount of time.
In other words, the policy is if you take off and you don't return in a reasonable amount of time, you'll be declared a suppressive. Yeah. Right.
So I was like, all right. At the time, I thought maybe I could just go back to Flag and route out there properly, So anyway, I come back. Here's another thing I did. I changed my flight at the last minute to reroute to or get to Tampa Bay Airport. That's where I was flying into at a different time, because I knew they would be meeting me at the airport. So at the very last minute, I changed my flight so that they wouldn't be there when I got there. And so my parents picked me up. I went home. I talked to them. And by this time, like, they were pretty cool. Like, they weren't pressuring me to go back. They were just kind of, I think, more concerned for me. That's how you know that they're good people, And so 2 Searing members show up. They come sit with me. Everyone's really nice. Sharon Weber gets on the phone with me and says, "Sweetie, I get it. You don't want to get declared because, your brother, your sister, your family, like my brother at this point is like 10, just come back and do it the right way, leave properly, no problem, then you can continue in Scientology." So I bite, right? So I go back. So when I get back, immediate Dex set check, whatever. And at this point, I want to leave the Sea Org, right? But
how were you greeted when you get back?
Very, very coldly.
Okay.
Yeah, they weren't nice to me.
So Sharon wasn't still calling you sweetie when you got to the ship?
No. Yeah, no, that was a ruse.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So immediately I get put on the sec check. So here's where it's interesting because and I'm put on like heavy labor and stuff, the same old stuff. So in the sec check, somehow they were convinced. They spent a lot of time on this, that I went out too deep.
Of course they were.
That I had.
Well, you'd flown to Italy. You went halfway around the world, and then you hung out with a guy who takes models around. Their mind's immediately going to go there.
Right, and they were just convinced. It was question after question after question. So to set the scene here, I'm 20 years old. I had never had a boyfriend. I had never kissed a guy. In fact, I was confident in my personality in a lot of those ways, but I had a lot of I was kind of overweight. I didn't know guys. The only person that had ever been interested in me on the ship was Sharon Weber's ex-husband, ironically, Bill Strauss. And he was 40 years older than me, or 30 years older than me. And he had given me, he knew I liked to draw, so he had given me some colored pencils or something. And I actually wrote a KR on it because I was this dude's way too old for me. I'm 17. What the fuck are you thinking? Which I don't think it ever went anywhere. But that's the only person that ever showed any interest in me at all.
Wow.
The whole time I'm there. Yeah. So
that is very unusual for the Sea Org.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I wasn't great to look at the time. I was a late bloomer.
Okay.
So.
Well, you're clearly not hideous to behold. So I'm kind of
Oh, thank you.
That's really weird to me. I'm wow, really? Really? Are you sure?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's true. I had plenty of crushes, on people, but It's just, I mean, it could have been the ship too, you know, it's not like there's a ton of crew members.
Well, you
on the
definitely
ship,
do have
right?
a limited number of, yeah.
Yeah. But you're right. I mean, most young girls around me were getting married and like, you know, at a young age and dating, and that just it never happened to me, you know. I mean, also I was chubby. I was pretty chubby, you know, like I had gained 30 pounds. So I think that had to do with it too. There were other young girls my age who were younger and prettier and thinner and stuff like that. But I'm glad actually at this point that I had that armor for whatever reason. Anyway, so you know, as any young teenage girl, of course I had wanted to be in a relationship. I mean, my entire teenage years that you're supposed to be dating, I mean, I didn't date anyone. I was like completely inexperienced. So, but now they're asking me all these questions, right? And I did not go to Out2D at all, not even remotely. So, they're just pounding me and pounding me and pounding me. And it's, you know, I know it's not an embarrassing thing that this happened, but even to say it, it's like, how could that have happened? But like mental, like abuse is just so insidious. I started like questioning, like, did I go out to D and not know it? Like, did I have sex and not know I did? Or like at one point I was like, could I be pregnant? Like, I mean, I was so like, did I somehow do this and not realize it? I mean, after like weeks and hours of being like, you know, interrogated. I remember there was another guy who wanted to leave at the time, and we were eating lunch together. He's out now. His name is Giorgio Serra, and I was talking to him about it. I said, Giorgio, like, could I be pregnant and I not know it? And he's the one who kind of snapped me out of it. He goes, Leah, don't be ridiculous.
Right.
No, he's like, stop, you know? He's just like Italian guy. He's like, Leah, don't be ridiculous. That's ridiculous, you know? And I recently, like, he's on Facebook and he's out now, and I recently like wrote him. I said, do you remember when you said that to me? And he said, yeah. I said, that really helped me. You know, I you know, thanked him for that. But anyway, so like it just kind of, I think people haven't been through it. Maybe they see that and they're like, that's crazy. Of course you weren't pregnant. Why would you think that? But being interrogated that long over the same things and not being able to get through it, it's not like I could say, no, I didn't go out to D. No, I didn't have sex. No, I didn't do these things. And then be like, okay, let's move on. You know?
No, that's not what happens. And if they've got it in their head that they're doing that you've done that, they're going to vary, the tech of it is that you vary the question. So you're going to be asked literally, I'm not exaggerating right now, 20 different ways, whether you have had sex, had sexual intercourse, sexual activities, heavy petting. They'll word it 20 different ways to try to hit it from all these different angles to try to get you to cough up that you've done something that you really just didn't do.
Yep.
And they don't believe you, they believe the meter, you know?
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that happened for a while, and then there was a small moment in time where I was like, well, maybe, you know, I was kind of being guilted about wanting to leave, and I thought, well, maybe I should stay. Like, maybe, you know, so there was probably a period of about 2 weeks in that I thought, maybe I'll stay. And I said that in my sec check, and of course, Sharon Weber saw me in the hallway and was like, oh my gosh, you've decided to stay. This is amazing. And like, you know, then I was kind of back in good graces after being shit on for weeks. And, but I hadn't actually decided. I had been like wavering, you know, and probably a week later I'm in my sec check, because now I'm just finishing my sec check, right? Or maybe it was a few days later. And I'm like wavering back in the other direction. Like maybe I will actually, you know, at this point I was like kind of going back and forth. I was thinking things of like, I'm the oldest, like who's going to take care of my parents when they get older, and like, you know, stuff like that. And I wasn't like certain either way, but it's the next irony is that because I had kind of wavered back the other way and I wasn't sure, again, I'm walking down the hallway and Sharon Weber is like, you piece of shit. You know, and she's like yelling at me like I'm a liar, and at that point I'm like, well, you just made my decision for me.
Exactly.
Like I'm not staying. So this is probably about a few weeks in, a month in after I came back. So at that point I said, I want out, I'm done, I'm leaving. you know, and they keep sec checking me on this 2D stuff, and I can't get through my sec check, and they keep like yelling at me and whatever, and that goes on for about 6 months.
6 months? Oh
Yeah.
my God.
So they...
And are
so
you going
by
in
the
session
time-
every day?
No.
Okay, so this is like periodically while in between your dex work?
Probably like 2 days
Okay.
a week.
But 6 fucking months of this.
Yeah. From the time that I said, I'm out, I want to leave, till the time they let me go was 6 months.
Jesus Christ. I mean, mine
Yeah.
took 8 months, but the sec check part was a week. I mean, once I finally got an auditor, it went really fast. It was just trying to wait for a fucking auditor that took me forever. But you were going in periodically and just getting shit on over and over and over again for 6 straight months. That is awful.
Yeah. So, Chris, the only reason they actually ended up letting me go, because there was no end in sight, is I threatened to kill myself.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. So, I at the time, I had no intention of doing so. But, again, having worked in HCO, I knew that, you know, now, the reason I hadn't done that prior, because I suspected that they'd let me go pretty soon after that. And the only reason I had done that prior is because I still wanted to be a Scientologist. So I knew that it would make it difficult to go in session, right? If you have like a suicide threat, right? You have to like jump through extra hoops or something. And so I had kind of like put that in my back pocket for like, if it just got to the point where I couldn't stand it anymore. So I threatened, I said, you know, I'm thinking about ending it all or whatever. I made this big threat or whatever, and instantaneously they had me on lockdown. The good news is they put me in an office, an air-conditioned office with a camera, and I was just like laminating ID card, like passenger ID cards, you know. But it was awesome because I was like in this air-conditioned office, and I was, prior to that, I'm in the grimy engine room nonstop, you know.
Oh, yeah, they're not
So,
going to have
at
you
one
near the
point,
heavy equipment at that point where you could start drinking the diesel fuel. Right.
Yeah. Like, oh, I forgot at one point my hard labor, I was working with, at the time, FBO, who had been knocked down there for he pissed COB off.
And they had sent him to the ship.
Yeah, and we were cleaning the bilges, literally.
Now, now FBO is Flag Banking Officer. This is a senior finance person within the Church of Scientology. Right. This is a person at the international level deciding where money goes and banking it. That's the Flag Banking Officer. That's their job, is to put money in the bank and deal with it and act like a bank. And this guy got busted so hard that they sent him from LA, where he could have gone to the RPF or he could have gone to Dex over there, but they bust this guy so hard that he's cleaning bilges at the ship?
Yeah, I think it was what I heard through the rumor mill. It had something to do with, you know, there's like an LRH policy about cleaning bilges, right? So, that, like, you know, like, I mean, he mentions it in numerous times, like, oh yeah, then you have to clean the bilges or whatever. I mean, no one ever really did that on the ship, right? So, but like, I guess David Miscavige wanted to be literal. So I was actually we cleaned these bilges. I mean, they were wonderful. Like, by the time we were done, like, cause we like, you know, used like power tools to grind them down, and like we had like apparatuses on and like got all the rust out, and then we painted them and everything. By the time we were done, it's like there were times where I would like fantasize or daydream about like hiding down there and just like coming up and sneaking food and like sleeping down there.
Wow.
So anyway, that was that was the type of work I was doing. I'd come and I'd just be covered. You know, there was one time where I was, you know, they don't really give you a lot of instructions on how to work with these like machines and stuff, you know, and I had never done any of this stuff. There was one time where I had to paint a deck, and they used this like really strong oil-based paint, and I went into the paint locker, which is where all the paint is kept, and someone hadn't put the top on one of the paint cans, so I went up to get it, and I tipped it a little, and it fell, like all the paint like fell all over me. And I was like, I just stood there, and all of a sudden it just started burning because it's toxic. Ooh. So I ran to the shower, and with my clothes on and everything, just like showered, you know, I mean, it got in my eyes. I mean, it was bad. God. You know, stuff like that.
That is crazy. On a ship. A ship that goes up and down and side to side and moves around. they leave a can of
Yeah.
toxic paint with no lid on it.
Yeah, I mean, well, it had a lid, but someone didn't put it on properly. Yeah, I mean, it's just,
I mean, still.
but no one was trained properly. Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
I've always,
I mean,
it's funny, I only have to comment on this really fast because the PR of the ship is that it is the cleanest, most efficient, smoothest sailing, most amazing machine in the Caribbean. Right? All the pipes are color coded and, everything has been worked out to the nuts and the bolts and it's all beautiful and wonderful there. And there isn't any, and it's like the most perfect model vessel that everybody else in the Caribbean goes to look at it and admire and award because the Sea Org is so awesome and they show other people what to do. This is, what I'm saying right now is literally how Scientology presents the ship to Scientologists.
It's really just a bunch of kids trying to figure it out. I mean, there are people like higher up, like Mike Napier knew what he was doing. And he was a merchant marine, I believe, before he became the captain of the Freewinds. So, there were people that had like real life experience with ships, but then under a certain level, it's just, I mean, we were kids, just a bunch of kids.
Wow.
So anyway, so yeah, I mean, after I got, after I threatened to kill myself, they put me in that room and they had like, I remember my back was to the camera and I had a friend who was a security guard, and we were like, we used to say that we had the same birthday, right? So we used to joke that we were siblings, and he was a security guard, so he would come in there sometimes and sit with me and work on these things. We weren't allowed to talk, but our backs were to the camera, and so we would like talk to each other because they couldn't hear anything, they could just see it. And we would like talk to each other with our backs to the camera, like doing our work or whatever, because he wasn't allowed to talk to me because I was, wanting to leave.
Wow.
And, stuff like that. So he's out now too. He's not out of Scientology, but he's
out of the Sea Org now.
Out of the Sea Org.
But plus you were on under watch. I mean, not just security watch, but suicide watch.
Right. Yeah. I mean, they would walk me everywhere. Stuff like that. But 2 days after I threatened to kill myself, they let me go.
That'll do it. That'll do it. Dead bodies on the ship are not easy to explain.
Yeah, suddenly I got through my sec check.
What? Like suddenly the Out2D wasn't so important.
No. So they let me go, and
wow, that was it.
That was it. That was the end of my adventure.
And then after you left, I'm assuming you went home, or where did you land? How did you recover from this whole thing and get back on with your life?
So I went home. Again, here's where I'm way more lucky than a lot of second gens, and my parents welcomed me with open arms. Wow. I mean, again, super lucky in that way. They tried to get me some like false data stripping, I think, and
that's it. That's a Scientology procedure, by the way. False data stripping. That's something to remove supposedly false information from your head, so you're not thinking with it anymore.
Right, because I was, I wasn't going crazy. I mean, I wasn't doing drugs and, just, going off. I don't know. I was still a virgin, and I mean, it was like another year, I think, or 2 years before I lost my virginity. I mean, I was just like still kind of. I wasn't, I immediately got a job. I had to learn to drive. I got out in April, and I turned 21 in July. So. But, they were, obviously I was like, kind of just, I don't know. I kind of, now looking back, at the time, I wasn't self-aware enough to know this, but I was kind of just flailing, and I don't know, I just didn't know what to do.
Well, sure.
I knew I needed to get a job. So I got a job in a Scientology company in HR, ironically. And
the equivalent of HCO.
Yeah, and then my parents tried to help me. They taught me how to drive, and I got a driver's license, and I saved up money, and I lived with them until about 23 or whatever, and I dated a bit. I was still so incredibly naive that I didn't. The world was like the equivalent of like a light that was too bright. It was just like, I would see everyone was out ethics, because I went from like an environment, like a pressure cooker, where if you walked by a piece of paper and didn't pick it up, right, that was an overt. So when you sat down and wrote up your overt and withholds, like that was one of them, right? I went from that to where like no one gave a crap.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
You know, I mean,
Completely.
just, and I was just like, what is this world? Everyone is just insane, you know, and
Yeah. No, not
you
really.
know, this,
Yeah.
and right, exactly. But the standards that you're held to are so incredibly like wackadoodle that you go into this world, and I was trying to hold myself kind of to the same standards, you know, and other people too, and so I was constantly getting upset and disappointed and whatever.
Yes.
And so for a long time, I had a lot of trouble, and then I mean, I adjusted eventually. I mean, you do, right? What else are you
Of
gonna
course.
do?
Of course.
You know, my cousin actually, you know, I was saying how, you know, you have to adjust, like what choice do you have, right? You know, well, my cousin, who is a little younger than me, he joined, I think AOLA or ASHO, and he was in there for only about 2 or 3 years, and he got out, and he had a hard time adjusting, and he ended up killing himself.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So, I mean, you have a choice to adjust or not, I guess, you know, and at the time I wasn't I mean, Scientology, I feel like, is so insidious because of the nature in which it says that everything's your fault, right? And you feel, I mean, the indoctrination is just that, because you don't recognize it as indoctrination. You recognize it as a belief that's not even a belief. It's something that's true, right? So it takes so long to kind of disabuse yourself of those feelings because you're not even aware that that's something that other people don't believe almost. And I think that because of that, you know, when he did end up killing himself, I was really angry at him. Like, dude, it's not that bad, you know? And I feel bad about that now, even having, I mean, I feel bad that I had those feelings because it's like I recognize that, you know, what we went through was just, when you tell a therapist for the first time what you went through and their response is to like stare at you in disbelief, you know, you realize kind of, oh, this is pretty bad.
Right.
You know?
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, because it took me a long time to unnormalize what had seemed so normal in the Sea Org.
Right.
You know, like you talk about the cleaning and stuff, and I go, well, yeah. I mean, even right now, I'm sitting here going, well, yeah, things should be clean.
Yeah.
But no, people don't really understand that, you know, it's like, no, every week, in fact, randomly every day, people are coming around with a white glove, running it over the surfaces of your bed and under your bed. And if it's not clean, you're at fault. And you're like, you know, I look at that now and I'm like, oh my God, you know.
Or like there was an ethics mission that came to the ship because we constantly didn't have enough people on the ship, you know, passengers. And they implemented this thing that if you're late or if your stats were down or if any kind of out point, right, you would immediately get a meter check. And so, for example, you know, getting 2 hours of sleep 3 nights in a row, and then the 4th night you sleep through your alarm, right? And then you get woken up to this bang, 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 and like, I mean, just startled awake, and then you get sent straight from that, right? Half awake, sleep deprived, you know, 16 years old or 17 years old to a meter check where they say, oh, no, you know, your needle is dirty. Like, you need to write up over some withholds, and, oh, sorry, you can't go until you pass your, you know, meter check again. You can't even leave the ship. Right, you can't go down off on the dock or anything like that. And so it's like, you know, even now I have to be woken up gently. Like if someone like knocks at the door or I wake up to a doorbell or anything that's abrupt, like I start panicking. Yep. You know, it's stuff like that it's the pressure cooker, right? So it takes so long to realize how messed up it was.
Exactly.
You know, and how it affected you. And how many relationships you ruined in the meantime because of it, or, you know, and I mean, I'm lucky now I'm married to an amazing man, but like, who he's not a Scientologist, never was, but he's so understanding and, you know, empathetic and just there for me, right? but like, it's so profound. Like you start realizing like, oh, click, like look at all this things I fucked up since then because of, and I thought I was right in doing so,
Right.
you know? Like,
Yeah, no, it is. It's a crazy upside down world in that world. And I wanted to ask you just a couple, now that we've gone through the whole arc of your story here, I just want to go back and touch on a couple things that I know people have asked me about for years. I was
Okay.
never on the ship. I've never even seen the ship. Yeah, I came to the West Coast once and I wasn't there, and I've just never been over there. I've been to Clearwater, been to Flag, but not the ship. So, so a couple questions that I get asked about all the time, right? One, blue asbestos.
Right. So we did go into dry dock to remove all of that when I was there, supposedly. I didn't know that it was there.
It wasn't part of the initial briefing when you got on the ship.
Yeah, exactly. But I did get tested after I came, because my dad actually, a couple years after I got out, was like, "Did you hear about this?" And my parents actually sent me to get tested, and I'm fine.
And this was a. So you didn't learn about it until the dry dock happened?
I didn't learn about it until I got out.
Oh, you didn't even, they weren't telling anybody.
No, and they brought in a bunch of like Hungarian workers to, like, it wasn't even the ship's crew who were removing it.
Okay.
So, I think maybe some people in the engine room knew about it, maybe, but no, they just thought it was like renovations, right? Like, we're just renovating. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And as far as you know, that was all removed at that point.
Well, I think so. I think that's what it was for, was that they were removing it, but I only know anything about it because my dad found out about it later, a few years later.
All right.
And so, like, I don't know if they removed all of it then or not.
Okay. So there was just no briefing to the crew about this in any way, shape, or form.
No.
All right. And that speaks to the next thing I wanted to ask you about, which is the compartmentalization of information. Because like you mentioned, Valeska gets sent to the ship and she's trapped there and you had no idea. And yet you're friends with her. The FBO gets sent there and is cleaning bilges because of some whatever. I think that bilges thing was some nonsense you guys were told, because otherwise everybody would have to go to the ship to clean the bilges if they get busted. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. Something about that guy in particular, that he did something to piss off COB specifically, landed him there, and who knows what that could have been. Maybe he told COB, "No, we can't afford you John Lobes this week," or something. I don't know. I mean,
Right, yeah.
Who knows? But he ends up there. Over the years that you were there, did you observe anybody else coming into the ship under mysterious circumstances, or being sent there, or that were there that seemed non sequitur at the time and you just didn't really think about it too much?
No, I don't remember anything else happening. I mean, I didn't remember anyone coming from the outside, anyone else coming from the outside. People would be kind of rotating in and out of the decks, especially when we had that ethics mission. Constantly just people getting busted and then being on the decks and then off the decks and on the decks and off. So we had a lot of that kind of consistently. With Valeska, I knew a little bit. I didn't know that she was like, the way that was presented to me was like COB was taking care of her. Like, her mom or dad had been declared, I forget which, and he was just like protecting her, right? So it was always...
Of course it would be put that way.
Yeah.
Of course it would.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so I knew something had happened, but I didn't know too much, and it's like she wasn't in trouble, she was being protected.
Wow. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. On the ship. Good.
Right.
All right. But you didn't see anybody else being protected that way.
No, I didn't see anyone else being protected. I talked to a lot of people like who were in gold and stuff, like during Maiden voyage. I would talk to them, and that was like my dream, was to go to gold because I'm creative.
Right.
Gosh, looking back, I mean, it's funny to say I lucked out, but there were certain things that happened that, like, if I had been sent to gold, you know, that would have been even harder to get
Oh
out.
yeah.
Um,
Oh yeah.
you know, um, just little things like that where, man, it's fortuitous that they happen. I mean, if the LC hadn't done that, then I wouldn't have snapped, you know, and that kind of started the ball rolling with me leaving. You know, I have friends even now who are still on the ship, still in the Sea Org, you know, and I think about them all the time. I mean, you know, 14 years later, right? No longer. Okay, 17 years later.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I think about them all the time, and I think, like, if they only knew,
Right.
you know, life is nice out here.
It's amazing out here. I mean, as bad as the
Yeah.
politics and the world and the economy and all that kind of stuff, you know, we're going to be talking about that stuff forever. I mean, there's always going to be problems with that. But the fact of the matter is, the world out here is 1,000 times better than what goes on in the bubble world of Scientology. Have you, over the years, been asked, or you know, are there any other aspects of ship life that you think might be of interest or different from the regular Sea Org experience that you've seen, you know, from other X's or other books and memoirs and whatnot?
I think, I mean, the obvious main difference is that you're on a ship, right? So you have the ship duties, and that stuff actually I found interesting. I mean, you had to do, like, I became a certified lookout, you know, and helmsman and stuff, and I knew ship terminology and stuff like that. So, you know, I learned how to drop a lifeboat into the water and stuff like that. So, I mean, if anything, I was happy for that stuff because it was cool. You know, that stuff's interesting. This is actually unrelated, but when when they finally let me leave, I did have a ComEv.
Oh, okay.
So, and this made me think of something. They actually, so this is the last kind of nail in the coffin for, you know, my certainty on the tech, right? So, they sat me at the ComEv, they sat me in front of the qualsec, who was my friend, Rosanna. She was my lookout partner, you know. So we had spent hours and hours and hours together, just us two. And then, of course, the qualsec and whoever's on a ComEv, I forget, the Dryanar and some other people. So we're sitting there, and they tell me, okay, so here's the deal. You either need to go to the RPF, or we're going to declare you.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So they gave you the Sophie's choice on the RPF. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They did. And you know what why I did, Chris? It's so funny. I took the policy on the RPF, right? Because the RPF policy says this is why you should go to the RPF, right? You know, stat crasher.
List 1 RSer.
You know, rock slammer.
Right, yeah.
Right, yeah, all this stuff, right? And I go through, none of them say having doubts about the Sea Org, right? So I didn't qualify for the RPF, even according to their standards. So I like put the policy in their face, and I said, I don't qualify for the RPF. Like, my stats actually were up overall, and, you know, I have doubts, and the RPF is for people who want to stay in the Sea Org, but they need to rehabilitate. I don't even want to be here, you know? And then I said, show me how I'm a suppressive person. Like, I took that out. Like, I don't qualify to be a suppressive person, you know? And then of course, you know, there were also tears where I pleaded to my friend Rosanna, and I said, Rosanna, my little brother, he's 10. Like, you're going to make me disconnect from my brother? Like, why? I don't, like, this is ridiculous. You can't do this. Anyway, I don't know what happened, but they didn't end up declaring me, and they let me go.
Wow. Well, I mean, maybe the suicide thing helped, too.
That was after the suicide thing.
Oh, got it. Okay.
That was on my way out.
Got it. Well, you know, good for you for standing up and at least pulling out some policies and saying, you know, this is arbitrary bullshit. And probably some order from Sharon, to be honest, is probably where that came from.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, it's it's insane, though, because, you know, in all of this, I look back and I think the only reason I had any of the courage to say any of this stuff or fight back or push back at all is because I had a family that was going to be there for me, you know? And if I hadn't had that, which a lot of people don't have, and so then I think it would have been way worse, and I would have been like knocked around so much more, more than I was. It's like I always think I'm like, oh, I didn't have it bad. I know people who were there for 17 years. I mean, it's like I had it easy in comparison, and then like I tell my story to people who have never been in, and they're like, well, that's easy.
Yeah, no, it's weird because what you just said is true. I mean, there are people who who experienced worse things, but that doesn't. This isn't a I say this to people. This isn't a competition. We're not in the victim Olympics. In talking about Scientology, that's not the point of what we're doing this for. Right?
Right. Yeah. No, absolutely. It's more like I just feel like sometimes, when I've talked about the things that have happened to me and how it affects me, it's like I feel bad. Like it's another like layer of how I feel bad, because it's like what I went through was nothing compared to a lot of other people. And so the fact that it's affected me so profoundly, it's like, I had a wonderful family to fall back on. I had, all these things. And so it's like, it just goes to show you how pervasive the indoctrination is, because even now it's like, I shouldn't be this affected by it. It shouldn't have affected me this poorly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In ways, but of course it does. I mean, I know logically that's wrong, but it never ends.
Right.
It's like you work every day to try to end
exactly.
it. So.
And I know exactly how you feel. I mean, I really get it.
Oh,
yeah,
I believe you.
I really get it, because every day is like you look back on some things and you go, oh, that wasn't so bad. We're talking about this stuff and it really is not that so bad. And then you wake up the next day and you look at it and you go, what the fuck was I thinking? That wasn't so bad. That was insane.
Yeah.
What do you mean the RPF wasn't that bad? what are you talking about? Or being stuck cleaning bilges or whatever,
Yeah, I can't even imagine being on the RPF. Like stuff like that. Like, yeah, I mean, or then, I still have, it's starting to, I don't have them as much now, but I mean, 14, 15 years later, I would still have nightmares. I would like wake up, like my nightmares would always be being trapped somewhere, like running around and not being able to escape, like usually on the ship, like running around the lower decks and not being able to find stairs out. Or I would have dreams that I rejoined the Sea Org, like real dreams that and I would wake up and I would be freaking out, and just like, so like for a day, I would be in a haze, like thinking like reminding myself that I hadn't rejoined the Sea Org.
Yeah.
And just like that becomes normal too, where you're like, and then you realize, wait, I'm having nightmares. Something's wrong.
That's right. That's right. Oh no, I get it. I have. There have been a couple times I've woken up and wasn't sure which one was reality.
Exactly. Yeah. I thought I was still in the Sea Org, and and now that I have kids, I started waking up and being like, I left my children, but at least there's that relief when you realize that's not true.
Yeah. There was one time I almost, I don't know what to say about this, except there was one time I woke up and I was almost crying. I was so happy that the dream had just been a dream. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess that's the gold at the end of the rainbow is that you get to relieve realizing you're not in it anymore. Exactly. And that is a good feeling.
Big time. All right. Well, Leah, thank you for sharing all of this.
Yeah.
Maybe people will have questions in the comments of this video. I'll send you a link to this so you can maybe respond to some of those if you want.
Okay.
This will go up pretty soon, and I just want to, again, thank you very much for taking the time to share your experiences with me on this and enlighten folks out there about, what you went through, what this thing is all about, and hopefully answer some questions out there about, what goes on the ship specifically. So.
Yeah. No problem. Thanks for your time as well.
No problem. All right.